Today, we are going to start a new book. The title of the book is Ground, Path, and Fruition. The author is Kenting Tai Situpa. And I would like to talk a little bit about him first. And in the first part of the book, they also talk a little bit about who he is. And so he has a long-term, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime with the Karmapas. And this is a very important point. And in fact, he was the person that was in charge of the committee. I don't know if that's the exact word, in charge of the group of heart sons of the 16th Karmapa that chose, or who found and then chose the 17th Karmapa. So it's important to have a qualified teacher. He certainly is qualified. He holds an unbroken lineage that goes back to the Buddha Shakyamuni. And in fact, he was prophesied by the Buddha to become the next Buddha, the fifth Buddha of this fortunate age. He is considered to be an emanation of Maitreya, who was one of the Karmapa's disciples. Padma Sambhava also foretold of him. And Padmasambhava, when he was in Tibet, he hid what are called treasures. And there are various types of treasures. Some of them are mind treasures, some of them are actual objects, and then some of them are texts. And I'm not sure what kind of a treasure this was. If it was well, I guess I have here in my notes, it was a treasured text. And so Padmasambhava left these hidden in Tibet, and then when the proper person, you might say, was born, they would discover these. And frequently, Padmasambhava in these texts would say that this is who's going to discover them. So in this particular text, he named the various Situpa incarnations. The present one is the 12th Situpa in this lineage. And the first Situpa, his name is Choki Gyaltsen, and he lived 1377 to 1448. And the Situpas since then, many of them then were obviously heart sons of the Karmapa, but were in charge of, or very helpful to, training the next Karmapa after he was reborn and discovered. And in the first part where they're describing Tai Situpa, they say that his lineage goes back to a great teacher by the name of Drogon Reichen, who lived 1088 to 1158, and was a student of the first Karmapa. So right from the beginning of the first Karmapa, the Situpas have been close, very close to the Karmapas. The present Situpa, he was born in 1954. So that makes him approximately 64 years old at the present time. He fled Tibet in 1960, and then he went to Rumtek where the Karmapa had established his new, you might say, headquarters, his new monastery. And at some point after that, they built a new monastery. I visited Rumtek. It's now over 20 years ago. And there was the old monastery, which was abandoned. And there is the new one, which has been built since the Karmapa fled and has been added on to a number of times, even by that time. And that was in 1999 when I was there. So that is a little bit of background about Tai Situ Rinpoche. Now, I guess this has to do more with the way these incarnate lamas are trained after they were discovered, and that is they are generally, when they're brought back, having been recognized as the rebirth of one of these great lamas, they are subject to very intense training, much more intense than an ordinary being would receive. And part of the training that is traditional, whether you are an incarnate lama or just an ordinary being, is memorization of countless pages of these classic texts. And so when he was training, and this would have been, according to what he has written here, up into his late 20s, he learned and memorized countless of these classic texts and took incredibly voluminous notes. This is where this first poem that he starts out the book with comes from, are things that he wrote at this time of his life when he was in his 20s. He is not a Kenpo. We have met, many of us have met Khenpo Karta Rinpoche or Khenpo Tenkyong or both, Khenpo Ujin. And what Khenpo means is that you have received completed the highest studies possible in the Kagyu lineage. And it's very difficult to have that title bestowed on you. My understanding is that what happens is that, first of all, it takes years and years and years of study. And as I said, part of it is memorizing these great texts. He uses he talks about debating too, and that's part of it, is learning how to debate with other people and use logic and reason to make your point and discuss these things with other people. It sharpens your intellect to be able to debate. But where I'm going with this is that it's such a rigorous course of study. Well, how do they decide who gets the Kenpo degree? It's not graded. You do not have a grading system or even a pass-fail system. The way it works is that they just keep increasing the load of what it takes to stay in, you might say, the courses, and continue studying and continue learning. And those that can't keep up drop out. And so it's only the very highly motivated, the people that really know how to learn, memorize, debate, contemplate, and so forth, that get these Kenpo degrees. And it's even, as I said at the beginning of this, it's even more difficult for most of these incarnate lamas because they assume that you are not starting from the same place as an ordinary being would be starting from, based on your previous lives. So with that introduction, I am going to read these verses that he wrote, His Eminence Tai Situ Rinpoche wrote when he was in his 20s. And the title is appropriately Ground, Path, and Fruition. The essence of the Lord Buddha's teaching is a secret. When heard through the compounded ears of the stained ones, compositions themselves make stains possible. Therefore, the ultimate teaching is the non-dualistic Dharmakaya. Through pure devotion, intention, diligence, and faith, we listen, contemplate, meditate, teach, debate, and compose properly, becoming learned, morally disciplined, and compassionate. Finally, their essential meaning comes down to the same thing. The Lord Buddha's teaching evolved into 2, 3, 7, 9, and so forth, and so on. And again, from each of these numerous teachings developed. After a few more millennia, the teachings will be as abundant as the most profound cloud offering. Whether you know the many terms and philosophies of relative truth or not, if you practice the path of your lineage, and then in parenthesis, Samaya, which is the root of the three vehicles, with your body, speech, and mind, I have no doubt the primordial wisdom, the essence of everyone, will manifest from within. Relaxed, new, exposed to the sacred Dharma, we become confused by the complexities of the view, meditation, action, and fruition of the great central texts. Confounded, I saw our heads turn like the spinning peacock feather umbrellas meant for the noble ones. Therefore, the ground, path, and fruition are simplified and made short. As I have done this for my own notes, so I don't forget. And maybe they will benefit some beginners. The ultimate is beyond description, but we use relative ideas to describe it. Therefore, the descriptions are not completely accurate, and our view needs to continually evolve. As you climb the stairs of a house, you reach towards liberation. With each step, your view, meditation, and action progresses. As this happens, your realization will also progress. So that is the poem that he starts out this book with. Then, before he goes into explaining this line by line and stanza by stanza, there's a little bit of information in the introduction about where these teachings came from. That the book was published in 2005, And so these teachings, the everything in the book, came from a series of teachings that was one event that lasted 6 days. And there were a total of 4 hours of teachings each day, and multiplied by 6 days, and you have 24 hours of teaching. And his aspiration for giving these teachings, and also then having them published in a book, is that he that wants that this will help your knowledge of the Dharma become fuller and more complete. He said, I can help you with that, but it is up to the student to develop wisdom. And of course, the reason is that wisdom is inherent in our mind stream, and it's a matter of us to uncover it, develop it, give it a chance, you might say, to come to the surface. And he says that he is passing on what he has learned from his, quote, great masters, unquote. So the great teachers that he has had, he doesn't list them, but of course, one of them would be the 16th Karmapa, who he was very close to in Rumtek after they both fled Tibet. They fled separately, by the way. They did not leave together. They were in different monasteries, different physical locations. So then he finishes up with this, that if you have 1,000,000 lifetimes, quote, as long as each lifetime improves 1,000,000th, that is good enough for me, end quote. So what he is saying here is he wants you to continue to improve. You don't have to make great, huge improvements, but as long as you improve even a little bit, he feels that is good. I would say part of what he's trying to convey here is the path is not an all or nothing sort of thing. It isn't that we either get enlightened in this lifetime or that's it, but we try to improve the best we can, little by little, and then next time around, continue to improve. One of the aspiration prayers that we say at the end of the Mahamudra lineage supplication is that in all my lifetimes, may I be close to the perfect guru, and so travel the path, and so forth. And I will also say this, that I have attended a number of teachings in this country given by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I have heard him say this numerous times, that that if you have improved a little bit since the last time we met, and he frequently precedes that with saying, "Oh yes, I recognize da 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 da," and so on and so on. Not, and he won't even name people usually, and say, "But I recognize a lot of the people here," and so he ends by saying the same thing, that what is important is to do what you can and improve as you are able to, as you progress. And I also heard him say once that enlightenment in one lifetime, that's propaganda, that it takes more than one lifetime to attain enlightenment. Now, on the other hand, we don't know how much we've worked on this in our previous lifetimes. We do know that since we're interested in it, especially if we were not brought up Buddhist, that we have had a strong relationship with Buddhism in past lives. That's one reason why we are attracted to it. So with that, I would like to begin the next section, which is Understanding Dharma, and this starts on page 16. And so this section discusses these verses of his that I just read everything of. So I'll read them in sections. So, which is the way they're presented in the book. So the first 4 lines are: the essence of the Lord Buddha's teaching is a secret. When heard through the compounded ears of the stained ones, compositions themselves make stains possible. Therefore, the ultimate teaching is the non-dualistic Dharmakaya. Now, the ultimate is not a secret to the Buddha. It's a secret to us. And it is secret to us not because it's been kept secret from us, because we have it within us in our mind stream, but we do not recognize it. The Buddha manifested as he did because of his primordial wisdom, which again we have too, unrecognized. He overcame dualism, seeing things as subject and object, self and other, for instance. And these teachings that he gave, then the source of them is the ultimate. He did not make them up. He just talked about what he knew from his primordial wisdom. Line 2 is: his disciples heard through stained dualistic ears and remember with dualistic minds. And so that is what he is trying to get at with this second line about compounded ears of the stained ones, is that his disciples, the people that heard the teachings of the Buddha, that they did not hear it purely, just like we don't hear the teachings purely. Line 3 is: compositions are anything that has parts. Put together, you could say. Also, subject-object is a composition. It's an overlay that we place on our experience and the phenomenal world. So it is because of this that stains are possible, that we separate subject from object, self from other, and so forth. Now, the Buddha gave 3 cycles of teachings: the foundational or the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. As the students evolved, and also for students in the future. Line 4, then the ultimate teaching is the non-dualistic Dharmakaya. This means that we only hear the ultimate teachings when we become Buddha. And the path leads to that, but it is a gradual path of listening and hearing, contemplation, practice. He uses the word evolving in many places in this text, this book. And I think that's an important point. Here on page 19 is a quote: "If we are progressing, its meaning will become deeper and deeper and more profound." End quote. And the obvious, the opposite is not, if you're not progressing, you're going backwards. He skips ahead. He skips the next 4 lines and goes to what follows. So the Lord Buddha's teaching evolved into 2, 3, 7, 9, and so on. Again, from each of these numerous teachings developed. After a few more millennia, the teachings will be as abundant as the most profound cloud offering. So 2 is the Theravada, or the foundation vehicle, and the Mahayana. And then 3 is you add Vajrayana or Tantra to those first 2. And then there are different levels of Tantra. And so they are Kriya, Charya, Yoga, Mahayoga, Anuttara Yoga, and Ati Yoga. And there you have 9. And he says, and so on. If you look into other Buddhist traditions in other countries, again, you start seeing how it grew into different languages, lineages, as well as languages from country to country. There is not a central language for the teachings of the Buddha. Some use Pali and some use Sanskrit. And frequently, in some countries, it's translated into the language of that country. So within just Tibetan Buddhism, there are different lineages. In the Mahamudra lineage supplication, it's divided up into the greater and lesser lineages. And these have separate teachings, separate practices, and so forth. And so in Tai Situ Rinpoche's words, it's a big jungle now. This is line 2. From each of these numerous teachings developed. And he says that it's important for us to associate with one tree, but respect all trees in this big jungle. Line 3 and 4, he explains, as this will continue in the future till they become beyond comprehension in terms of so many different teachings, so many different lineages, and so forth. And so a cloud offering, which is the teachings will be as abundant as the most profound cloud offering. A cloud offering is when you're visualizing an offering or a set of offerings, and then you imagine or try to visualize it multiplying over and over and over again until the whole sky is filled with these offerings, and that's called a cloud offering because it's a cloud. It's like having a sky that is full of clouds, but here it's full of these offerings. Rinpoche doesn't say that this is wrong. He just says this is how complicated it has become. So now he goes back to those lines that he skipped to cover these four. Through pure devotion, intention, diligence, and faith, we listen, contemplate, meditate, teach, debate, and compose properly. Becoming learned, morally disciplined, and compassionate, finally, their essential meaning comes down to the same thing. So lines 1 through 3 are relatively self-explanatory, and he will go into these in later on in the book in more depth. But basically, what he is saying is that we need pure devotion, we need pure intention, we need diligence, and we need faith. As we listen, contemplate, meditate, and then some of us teach, some of us debate, and some of us compose. In a way, you teach Buddhism every time you're kind to somebody else. Sometimes, in fact, that is the most profound way of teaching, is just being kind to other people. So then becoming learned, morally disciplined, this is having ethics, knowing what is harmful and what is beneficial, avoiding the harmful, and cultivating actions of body, speech, and mind that are beneficial to self and others. That's what morally disciplined means. And then, of course, compassionate, being concerned about the welfare of others. So to give a little commentary on this, we need lots of faith, lots of patience, and lots of diligence in order to conclude that it all comes down to the same essence. All these different teachings of the Buddha, and the same thing with sentient beings. If you just start seeing differences in sentient beings, you are stuck. So it's fine to see the differences in different Buddhist traditions, as well as sentient beings, but it's ultimately, they are all the same, whether it be the teachings or sentient beings. I think he's talking about the teachings here, though. The next lines are, and then again, since these were in reversed order, these second and third ones, now he's on to the fourth. Whether you know the many terms and philosophies of relative truth or not, if you practice the path of your lineage, then he has Samaya in parenthesis, which is the root of the three vehicles with your body, speech, and mind. I have no doubt the primordial wisdom, the essence of everyone, will manifest from within. So this describes a process of surrendering ego, of letting go of pride and arrogance. Now, before we can do that, we have to see it. This is an important point with any of our negative patterns, our afflictive states of mind, our afflictions, is first we have to see it before we can work with it. and transform it into wisdom. So on 22, here is a quote. If I am following an unbroken lineage of the Lord Buddha's teaching with faith and devotion, practicing sincerely in accordance with the morals and ethics of each practice, then whatever the ultimate essence is, it will definitely unfold from within. End quote. Now, what he means here by the moral and ethics of each practice is there are lots of different practices in Tibetan Buddhism. And some of you are familiar with the Nyungne practice, a practice of thousand-armed Chenrezig. And this practice stresses a lot of very strict external behavior. So it involves a lot of fasting. It involves a lot of periods of silence. Cleanliness is stressed. In another class of Tantra, these things would not be stressed or even present. So it really depends on what practice you are doing, what the ethics are, and the behavior to engage in is. So that's what he's getting at here by saying in accordance with the morals and ethics of each practice. So he is saying we don't have to be a Khenpo to have realization, that faults can develop from highly educated people. That you don't have to be an academic at all. There are countless stories in Tibet, and actually going back to India before Buddhism was even brought to Tibet, of yogis going and practicing by themselves and attaining a high level of realization. So that's what he is saying here, is we don't have to all go and study incredibly long for years and become a Khenpo to attain realization. Then he says that the ultimate essence is impossible to explain. He says that the Buddha means being above feeling and not feeling. That he is at a whole level above that. That a Buddha is above knowing and not knowing. And I will add to that, above meditating and not meditating. And I attended a teaching that he gave that this also gives you a little window on what he is trying to convey here. Again, he's using language which is in the realm of the relative to express the ultimate. But he was asked, is it one mind? Is it one universal mind? Frequently, it is talked about that all the Buddhas are the same. And so this is what he said. He said, well, if it was one mind, then when the Buddha was enlightened, we'd all be enlightened. And so from the relative point of view, it's not one mind. From the ultimate point of view, the question is it one mind? The answer is it's not two. Again, the point being that this is what we're talking about. The answer to this question is above relative conceptuality, language, and so forth, that it really cannot be put into words. It's ineffable. So the next verses are relaxed, newly exposed to the sacred Dharma. We become confused by the complexities of the view, meditation, and action, and fruition of the great central texts. Confounded, I saw our heads turn like the spinning peacock feather umbrellas meant for the noble ones. So he began this section saying that he feels that humans are stupider than cockroaches. Cockroaches know how to survive and live anywhere and everywhere, and that us poor humans do not seem to have that ability. So anyway, these lines are talking about the complexity of the central or foundational texts. So these are the great commentaries at a monastery or a nunnery, for that matter, up towards the front where the shrine is. There will be a collection of the sutras, the teachings that the Buddha gave on one side, the right of the Buddha statue, and then on the left will be just as large a collection of texts, which are the commentaries, the great central texts. And these can be very dense, needless to say. If you are studying to be a Kenpo, these are what you would be memorizing and studying. And I am sure that Tai Situ Rinpoche, that's what he studied, were these central texts and memorized and so forth. But unless he says, if they are a little bit lazy, in other words, if you're not really diligent, if you don't enthusiastically study these texts and ask questions, study them with a qualified teacher, ask questions and really chew on them and so forth, you become confused because of their complexity. And he said, our heads turn. And this is pretty easy to understand because we have a similar phrase in English. This is not something that does not exist in the English language. We'll say, it made my head spin. And so that's exactly what he's talking about. These peacock umbrellas are special, and they were just used for, like the Buddha, other great teachers, and then nobility in India. So that's what he means by the noble ones, both the noble in terms of dharmic and noble in terms of royalty. So the next is, therefore, the ground, path, and fruition are simplified and made short. I have done this for my own notes so I don't forget, and maybe they will benefit beginners. So he said that he wrote this verse before the others. And he goes into the problem of relative knowledge, and that is that you can never know everything. The more you know you don't know. And so then he goes into how different people will see the same thing differently. and that a dog will see things differently than a human, a pig will see things differently than a dog, and so forth. And actually, a dog that has been abused will see things differently than a dog that has had a loving home. And the same thing for like a street dog in India that never had a loving owner, and so on and so forth. That we all see things differently. And it isn't that everything is different, it is that all of us are seeing, you might say, through compounded, stained minds. The Buddha knows everything. He knows everything about a glass of water, for instance. But the rest of us don't. So then the next line is, the ultimate is beyond description, but we use relative ideas to describe it. Therefore, the descriptions are not completely accurate. Our view needs to be continually evolving. Or, excuse me, our view needs to continually evolve. So he talks about this continually evolving with the final verse where he talks about walking up the stairs of a house, that as you climb the path, that what you see is going to be from a different angle, a different point of view, and as a result, it's going to look differently. So this kind of will be covered as we go through this book.